Hello there and welcome to Star Wars Comics in Canon, your guide to the wider Star Wars canon through the comic book lens. And to take you on this journey, I'm your host, Mike Burton. And here we are with episode 17. Now, I will preface this and say, in previous episodes, this was initially going to be volume 3 of the main run of Star Wars comics, but I'm instead doing volume 2 of the Darth Vader comics. Now, the reason I'm doing this, just to clarify, is because timeline-wise, it marries up far better. In volume 3 of the Star Wars comics, there's a certain character that is with them, and if you're listening to all of these episodes and you're kind of going along with the ride, things won't make sense, they won't marry up, because timeline-wise, Vader Volume 2, which is what I'm speaking about today, is next. Then there's a series called Vader Down, which is a crossover event between the main run of Star Wars comics. I believe it's issues 13 and 14, as well as issues 13 and 14 of the Darth Vader comics, as well as issue 15 of the Darth Vader comics. So it's a crossover event, and then afterwards they'll marry up a lot better. So I'm doing it this way, and it means that in 2 weeks' time, so not next week, but the week after that, I will be doing the Vader Down crossover event, and then after that I'll be doing the third volume of the Star Wars comics, and then after that it will be Vader Volume 3. So that's basically where I am. I just want to explain that a little bit for you guys, just in case any regular listeners are a little bit confused and wondered why I did that. There's your reason. If you need any more explanation or anything like that at all, send me an email or contact me on social media and stuff. I can explain it a little bit better if I haven't done a good job here. But anyway, enough rambling on that part. Let's get into it. The second volume of the first run of Darth Vader comics, it contains issues 7 through to 12. The volume is called Shadows and Secrets, which is basically what the sort of, in air quotes, book/story arc is named. It's written by Kieron Gillen. The artist is Salvador Larroca, and the colorist is Edgar Delgado. Issue number 7, which is the first issue in this volume, was released in July 2015, while issue number 12 was released in November 2015, and the trade paperback / the collection of these was released in January 2016. So as a quick recap at the end of Volume 1 of the Darth Vader comics, Vader had just found out from Boba Fett that Luke Skywalker was the name of the rebel pilot who blew up the Death Star, and Vader was not very happy about that. As well as there was also some speaking of an apprentice that Palpatine was trying to basically get to surpass Vader in some ways. There was 4 or 5 of them. There was a couple of twins. There was Chulon Voidgazer, who's got loads of machines and stuff. There's like a General Grievous version 2 made out of a Mon Calamari. So that's basically, Palpatine said he was disappointed with Vader from Mustafar, as well as disappointed from him with his failure at the Death Star and a few other things as well. So he basically is sorting out these apprentices to do certain jobs that maybe Vader can't or is too busy to do, but also if Vader isn't quick on his toes, if Vader isn't sort of up to the challenge, then these apprentices will come up and get him, essentially, for lack of a better word. But that specific part doesn't come into further towards the end. This one is more about Vader and Doctor Aphra. Dr. Aphra is the rogue archaeologist mentioned in the previous one. I'm not going to go into huge details about her because if you've listening to this, you should go back and listen to episode 15 of Star Wars Comics in Canon, where I delve into that sort of stuff a bit more. So issue number 7 starts just after Darth Vader found out about Luke Skywalker. He then goes to Tatooine and goes to Luke's hut where he lived with his aunt and uncle, and he's there with Aphra, BT-1 and 000, the homicidal droids with Aphra, and essentially looks around, sees that there was a confrontation between Boba Fett and Luke, sees obviously the blaster shots from the Imperials who went in there, who killed Owen Lars and Baru. And Aphra says something quite interesting where she says if he was here, he would have potentially got killed by the Imperials, but equally, if his family would never be killed by the Imperials, he may have never left to go off with the rebels and may have never destroyed the Death Star, which is funny. And she said revenge is one hell of a motivator, and Vader agrees with her. They then basically just blow up the whole place after finding out, and Vader mutters a couple of words about how come he gave, Obi-Wan was with Luke for 20 years, why didn't he train him better, and things, which is all just quite interesting, a bit more sort of depth to that that sort of thing, and some fun little things to think about with the whole, Luke probably wouldn't have left if his aunt and uncle weren't killed. So how would that have affected the galaxy? A little part of me is hoping when Disney Plus released this What If series that seemingly is going to be about Marvel primarily, but I'm hoping there's some Star Wars stuff in there, because I would love to hear some stories exploring some of the what ifs. Probably the biggest one being, what if Anakin never became Darth Vader? What if when him and Mace Windu were over Palpatine, he killed Palpatine? What would have happened to the universe? That's quite an interesting thing as well that I'd like to see at some point. Obviously, it wouldn't be canon, but it's a bit of fun there. Anyway, I'm going to not think about all these what if scenarios because we're here all day. Going back into the comic, after deciding to blow up the remains of Luke's hut on Tatooine, they then decide to go to Son Tool. Now, Son Tool, there's not really much to say about it. It only shows up in the Aphro comic again, further down the line, so it's not really much to say about it there. But Vader goes there and he kills this Rodian gang boss and all the gang members, essentially, and gives the territory to Suther the Hutt. Now, Suther is someone who serves Jabba the Hutt and the Hutt clan in general. They are a male, and they appear in the Aphro comic as well. And it was basically just that the Empire likes to go around and kill certain crime lords, but to ensure there's not a huge power vacuum, they then kind of allow certain ones to be planted in there. In Volume 1 of the Vader comics, Vader did go to Jabba and made a deal with him. So the idea is sort of, if Jabba's controlling a lot of the crime lords and a lot of the territories and things, and the Empire and Vader have a hold on Jabba, it means that they can kind of control the criminal underworld in a certain way. It also allows the Empire to get to trade and get to steal a lot of black market things to help them further a lot of stuff that they're getting on with. Obviously, after the Death Star got blown up and that used up an incredible amount of resources, the Empire's kind of scrambling and needs more resources. So one of the other reasons that Vader went here and killed this Rodian gang was because he had millions upon millions upon millions of credits. So Vader basically just took all of them and delivered them to the Empire. Now, while this is going on, it cuts to a bar nearby. You've got IG-90, Bosk, Black Chrysanthemum, Aphra, and B-Box are all people who are sort of around there, bounty hunters in a sense. And I just want to put a little thing about IG-90, because IGs are in a few of the Star Wars films. You'd recognise IG-88 from The Empire Strikes Back, that famous scene where Vader calls all the bounty hunters there. You've got Boba Fett, Bosk, IG-88, Zuckuss, Forlom, and Dengar all there. And also, a lot of people know about The Mandalorian, which features an IG unit called IG-11, who is also a bounty hunter and things. So, and one thing that I found out, I had to look this up because I wasn't sure myself, IG actually just stands for intergalactic, as far as I can tell, and they were made as like assassin droids and things. There's several other versions of IG units. In fact, the Magna Guards, which are heavily in the prequels, which are in Revenge of the Sith, when on Grievous's ship, Obi-Wan and Anakin confront him, and then you've got the two Magna Guards who basically, they pull out the staffs that are electric, and there's like electricity on either end, and they spin them, and then Obi-Wan cuts off one of their heads and they're still going. That's a Magna Guard. Well, a Magna Guard is actually an IG-100 unit, funnily enough. And I'm looking online of a few things. It seems a tiny bit unclear, but essentially there was a company that created the IG assassin droid units, as well as numerous other units and things for droid making, but seemingly they created a certain amount of assassin droids, which is what the IG-88 and IG-11s are, the kind of bounty hunter IG units, and the IG units seemingly killed them and then became bounty hunters. That generally what it is. If I am wrong there, please someone tell me, but from what I can tell online, that seems to be what the case is. I have a feeling that what it is that in Legends it is hugely flushed out and there's a lot more information and it makes a lot more sense. There's probably a lot more stories in that, whereas because it hasn't been confirmed in canon, they've probably just lightly used some of the things that have been sort of said in Legends, mixing with what we know is empirically true in canon, which might be one of the reasons why on the canon side it's a bit unclear. I try not to too much to delve into the legend side of things because it gets a bit confusing for people. So with this, there's IG-90, who's basically the same as the other IG units seemingly, except he's red. I just want to bring that up because what a better time to talk about IG units. It's the thrill. Anyway, so the IG unit, IG-90, as well as Bosk, B-Box, who's a dwarf bounty hunter, is seemingly wearing armour that's fairly similar to Mandalorian, but presumably not Mandalorian armour, Black Chrysanthemum, who's the Black Wookiee, and Doctor Aphra. They decide to rob a cargo vessel which has confiscated loads and loads of credits. Now, It's seemingly they're alluding to the one which was shown in the scene before, which is basically Vader confiscating all those credits from the Rodian gang and transferring it to the Empire. Aphra is now planning on getting a bunch of people to rob that shipment. So moving on to the next issue, Aphra and the crew are basically, the plan is in motion. They're going to rob this Imperial ship that's got loads and loads of credits on it and things. What their plan is very clever. They have their ship kind of with seemingly a giant asteroid kind of connected to their ship, almost like it's a semicircle in a sense. And they're flying this ship asteroid thing, and then what happens is they blow up the surrounding rock around their ship, and it creates an artificial asteroid field belt, essentially. Obviously, driving through asteroids are very, very dangerous in all of Star Wars. Even if your ship has got really good deflector shield, they can do a huge amount of damage. So they blow this up, and it basically creates an asteroid field for the ship with all the credits on to try and maneuver through. So that kind of disrupts them. That makes their radar go a bit mental because there's so many bits and pieces that are random all over their radars and whatnot. That means that Aphra and crew can kind of sneak on. I believe they shoot an ion torpedo as well, which knocks out more of their sensors and things like that. So they sneak on while Black Chrysanthemum stays with the ship, while Aphra and the rest of them climb on. They go in there, they blow up some droids and things, they get to the safe, and then they go the signal for Black Chrysanthemum. He then gets one of the bigger asteroid pieces that's left. He tethers it with his ship, he connects it by this big metal wire rope thing, and he basically flies it just past the Imperial ship. He flies his ship just past, and disconnects the tether, and the asteroid really big one goes crashing into a specific point on the Imperial ship. As that happens, all of the credits, which are basically ingots, if you're unaware, if you haven't seen them in Star Wars very much, they're almost like a USB stick, but made purely out of metal. They're only shape and size of a USB stick in a sense. That's like a value of a credit. So it's an ingot of metal in some way. So all of these start flooding into space and things, and BT-1 has gone on the outside of the ship and basically uses a magnet thing to capture a fair chunk of the ingots that are now flying through space and probably will dissipate and sort of disappear. So the bounty hunters basically then all meet up after this successful mission. They each take their cut and things like that. They're a little bit kind of disheveled. They didn't get as much as they wanted, but obviously heists like that, they still got a lot of credits. Aphra then goes planet side, and Black Chrysanthemum is there, and they had this plan where when that all happened and BT-1 took a proportion of the ingots, then Black Chrysanthemum flew the ship very tactfully and managed to capture all of the other credits that were lost, which is a pretty huge majority of them. From what it seems to be is that BT seems to have got maybe a quarter of them, and that was split between 6 people, whereas the remaining amount, that's a much bigger cut and much bigger proportion. So they go planet side, that all sort of happens, and they split between them, and Black Chrysanthemum takes a fair chunk of the credits, and then Vader arrives. And he basically says to Aphra that he needs some information on someone who is elusive. And I just want to read you a bit of dialogue. It's not a huge amount of dialogue, but I just think it's a lot of fun. So when Vader says to Aphra, I need certain information from someone who is proving elusive, Aphra says, oh, the kid who destroyed the Death Star. And he says, no, not yet. First this. And he says, contact me only when you have succeeded. If you do not contact me within a month, I will contact you. That is not something you would enjoy. All this comic is pure brilliance of Vader. I absolutely love Kieron Gillen's style and how he's done this. And, obviously I love the Charles Soule Vader comics as well. They're really, really cool, but it's just, this is really nailing the original trilogy Vader on the head with a lot of the dialogue. So I just thought that was good. Shortly after that, Vader is back on an Imperial Star Destroyer speaking with Taig, who is the Grand General, who is the person I spoke about in the last issue. He argued with Vader a little bit, and the Imperial was a bit in A New Hope, and obviously this comic is set between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. And essentially, Vader's there with the other sort of apprentices in a way. He's there with the ones I sort of mentioned prior. In the other comics and things, the twins, Toulon Voidgazer, Carbin, who is a head of Mon Calamari on the body of essentially General Grievous. They kind of squabble a little bit and things. But Taig says to Vader, you need to find out who stole all these credits. There's millions upon millions, if not more, of these credits that have been stolen. We need to find out who took them and basically get them. Oh, and also, we're going to assign someone called Thanoth to watch over you. And if you remember the previous one, there was a guy called Unai who Vader managed to sort of cleverly make it seem like he was a traitor and a failure and that sort of thing, and kind of got out of the way of being caught in that regard. Thanoth is much more intelligent. He is a pure investigator. He's very, very clever. And there's a little dialogue exchange between them. Thanoth says, we have a star, at least. The culprits likely used the moons of Anthem Prime. It's an area you're already familiar with, and recently that knowledge will likely prove useful. And Vader says, knowledge. And obviously that's because that's where he went planet side, in air quotes, with Aphra. That's where all the credits were. That's where him and Aphra kind of schemed a few of these things. So he says to Thanoth, knowledge? And he goes, oh, from your trip to Anthem 13 yesterday. And Vader's silent. And Thanoth says, I believe the slight ionization of surface dust on your armour is characteristic of that particular moon. Within 24 hours, it'd have been lost. But for a day or so, it's quite distinctive. And Vader says, you are most perceptive. And then Thanoth says, Lord Vader, I'm not a sycophant, traitor, or worse for incompetent like Unai. I'm a professional investigator. So that is like on point there. So obviously Vader's quite worried about this because Vader's doing all these scheming things behind his back, and it's just basically sorted out this entire theft and orchestrated all this to steal all these Imperial credits under the radar, and this guy's coming in and seems already much ahead of the game. So it's this comic issue this whole volume is very clever and very brilliant of the way Vader kind of goes around it with Aphra. So the next issue starts with Vader on Anthem 13, that planet that he has been known to have that ionized dust on him from. He kills a group of rebels just kind of randomly, and then it cuts to him speaking with Thanoth over hologram, speaking communication, and they talk about some plans and what they think happened and this sort of thing. And Thanoth says, just to ask, by the way, Vader, why exactly were you on Anthem 13, recently? You never actually told me. And he says, oh, I killed loads of rebels, essentially. And he goes, oh, well, it wasn't in a report, it didn't seem to be reported. And Vader's like, well, no, I do not feel like going to a small group of rebels and killing a few of them is worth comment. If you want, you can go and see their bodies. And obviously, cleverly, he is trying to outmaneuver this guy. He's killed these rebels now to look like he was there the day before to cover his tracks, which I just thought was great. But anyway, Thanoth figures out a plan to basically get someone called the Dragon, who is someone who was involved in this deal. So they go to this place where they think someone's going to know something about the Dragon, and it's a guy called Duwan. And the twins are there, the apprentice of Palp twins kind of things. They're there, and they basically cause a bit of a ruckus and things, but Vader manages to interrogate Duwan, gets the Dragon's location, and then the twins kill the guy. While that's all happening, Aphra is speaking to someone called the Auntie. Now, the Auntie is a person who just seems to have loads of connections to lots of different places, and he knows a lot of information. I'd almost compare him to Varys of Game of Thrones, if you know about that, with loads of little sparrows, and he's the person you go to for gossip and information. That's what the Auntie seems like. So he wants information on someone called Comodex Tarn, who is actually a mortician on Naboo. So issue number 10, Vader then finds the Dragon, who is an Ortolan. And an Ortolan is basically, they're blue-skinned, and they have almost like an elephant trunk in a sense, but they are still humanoid. The most famous one is called Max Rebo, and he's actually in Jabba's palace in Return of the Jedi. If you watch episode 6 of Star Wars and you see a blue-skinned, big floppy-eared, trunk-nosed being seemingly playing an instrument, that's Max Rebo, and that is the species I'm speaking of. So that's basically who the Dragon is. Vader speaks to him, gets the information, and then kills him, just so he can't give any more information out. Thanoth then manages to open the Dragon's vault and gets it, to quote him, the final link in the chain. And he says to Vader, don't worry about coming with me or anything, because you being with me is just going to attract more attention. You do whatever, I'm going to go find this out. While this is happening, Aphra goes to Naboo, and just to clarity, Naboo is where Palpatine is originally from, and it's also where Padme Amidala is from. It is featured quite heavily in the prequels, and to my knowledge you don't really see it in the sequels or the original trilogy, except I think right at the end of episode 6 and the end of episode 9, I think when you see the sort of celebrations, yay, there's a big ceremony and everyone around the universe is all clapping and applauding. I think that's the only time you really see Naboo in the original sequels, but it's where Jar Jar's from as well, so Gungans and things, so you should all generally know about Naboo. So Aphra on Naboo, she basically manages to confront Comodex Tarn. She's there with like a mini droid army, as well as BT-1 and 000. And I just want to read a bit of dialogue from Aphra, because this is the first time you actually hear any degree of backstory from Aphra. I've been fairly light with certain dialogue, because as I said before, I don't want to read everything verbatim in the whole comics to you, because that won't mean it's any fun you guys reading the comics themselves. But Doctor Aphra is a very interesting character, and all we really know about her at the moment is that she's very clever. She's basically like a rogue archaeologist, has really good with droids and electronics, making traps and all kinds of other things, but that's all you really know about her. And I think I said in the previous episode I think she was born in 26 BBY, so at this time she's like 26 years old, so young woman, and that's all you really know about her. So I'm going to read out a little bit of information just to what she says in this one page. Accommodates Tarn says, it's easy to say when you're not the means, ends justify the means to her because they're arguing about if Padme was a good queen or a great queen, anything like that. And Aphra says, oh, I'd want a strong queen over a good queen. And then eventually Aphra basically says, when you were playing courtier on Naboo, I was trying to grow up living in a galactic civil war. I had a mum who pretended we weren't. Homestead on the frontier, a brave spiritual life on a new world after a split from dad. The thing with wars, if the war doesn't get you, all the scum opportunists profiting from the chaos will. Raiders came in. Mum told me to run. I did. But I came back with this awesome cannon I found in a cave I was exploring and blew them all to pieces and saved everyone. And my dad came back and we lived happily ever after. And now I spend my time wandering the galaxy recovering awesome cannons. My mum definitely didn't die in a ditch on a dead-end forest world we only went to because she was so idealistic. And Tarn said, I'm sorry. And she said, weren't you listening? There was a war going on. Everyone has a sob story. Boo-hoo for everyone. Which is just a little insight into it. And when you get into the Doctor Aphra comics themselves, it goes into a lot more depth as to who she is, and you get a lot more flushed out backstory and things. And I believe there's actually an audio drama coming out. I think it's coming out soon, and it's about Doctor Aphra, and it is basically like a retelling of Aphra's perspective in all these Vader comics. So it gives you an introduction to Aphra, but from her perspective. And it's got voice actors and additional scenes and loads of other cool things going on there as well. So if you like these Vader comics and you like the Aphra character and things like that, look out for the audio drama coming out, because the Star Wars audio dramas, which I think you can get them on like Audible and stuff, they've got sound effects, they've got music, they've got voice actors. So it's not like someone reading out something, it's a full-on experience. A lot of people compare it to almost like, it's like the movies without the visuals. They're really good, so I'm quite excited to see what that's going to be all about. But yeah, Aphra. After interrogating Tarn a little bit and speaking with him and whatnot, eventually Tarn confirms that, well, after being tortured by 000, Tarn confirms that Padme had a son, and he manages to not mention the twins, which is why people don't know about Leia very well. But Aphra confronts him and specifically says, Senator Amidala had given birth to a son, right? She had a son. The Jedi took that boy and put him in hiding. This can all be over if you just confirm that. And he says, yes, she had a son, a healthy boy, they took him away, and I don't know anything else. And obviously he was a mortician, so he probably did know about Leia, but obviously keeping it very much on the down low. And then 000 electrocutes him to death, and that's basically the end of that. So then it goes to a scene where Aphra tells Vader all of this. Vader says to basically find out where Luke is, so Aphra basically goes out to seek out the Auntie, and there's someone spying on them, because I think they're on Anthem 13 still, where all the credits were, that sort of stuff. And so you see a little red dot in the background spying on them that you don't really find out until the end of this comic, so I'll just leave that. So next issue, Thanoth and Vader are basically assembling a strike force to take down to where the Auntie is and things. And while that's happening, Aphra is speaking with the Auntie once again. He tells her that Luke is on Vrogus Vas and he hasn't told anyone else. He was holding out for someone with the most amount of money. Aphra clearly given all those credits by Vader, or rather she stole and Vader kind of let her have. She manages to use this money and find out. So he's on a place called Vrogus Vas. And around that same time, Vader and Thanoth land in the Auntie's base. Someone lets off a stray shot, which is actually BT-1. He lets off a stray shot when the stormtroopers land, which causes a big shootout and things. BT-1 and 000 and Aphra kind of trying to slink away. And while that's happening, Thanoth and Vader talk to the Auntie. The Auntie says, look, it's Aphra who stole all those credits, and points her out. And then when Auntie's going to give a bit more information, Vader uses the Force to kind of knock someone in the background who's shooting, and their gun turns, hits the Auntie, and obviously none of them are looking in that general direction, so Thanoth turns around and sees it was just a stray shot, and the Auntie dies straight away, which is another very clever way of Vader covering his tracks. So then while all this chaos is basically going on, Vader pursues Aphra, and he manages to get her. He force chokes her and lifts her up, and is basically going to kill her, because obviously it would cover his back and things, and she mutters that she knows the location of Luke. And Vader immediately stops choking her and says, okay, tell me. And Aphra says, no, I'm not going to tell you. I'll tell you later. Let me go, let me live, and warm it up, and I will tell you. So he then makes where they are, it's like a kind of a cavern-ish sort of thing, a tunnel. He makes the whole thing collapse in on itself and manages to get out. And Thanoth goes up to him and says, oh, what happened? And he said she sprung a trap and managed to escape. Then the final issue of the comic starts with Aphra in her ship trying to get away from Imperials and things. The blockade spotted them and they're trying to get her essentially. And Vader and Thanoth are there in the command center talking and saying about what to do next. And Vader says this is a waste of time. And Thanoth is like, how? And Vader says, well, we've got a strike force ready. We've got the location of the Plasma Devils, which are a rebel cell that Tague mentioned very early on in the comics, which is what I believe Carbin is going after, the Mon Calamari and the Grievous gear. So trying to get these Plasma Devils, who are just a sect of the rebellion, who have a name for themselves and are doing damage across the Empire and things. And Vader says to Thanoth, look, we're here chasing a simple thief when we've got the location of the Plasma Devils and things. And Thanoth says, curse me for a fool, my greatest weakness. The chase has consumed me. Lord Vader, may I suggest something daring? And Vader's like, okay, go on then. And basically Thanoth says, this thief, if we get her, yeah, that's quite a small thing. But if we can get to where the Plasma Devils are right now, we may not know where they are tomorrow or the day after, because they got the information from the ante. So they're like, look, we could change course. And if we're successful, I'm sure that the reward will outweigh the punishment for getting the Plasma Devils, as opposed to chasing after a thief. And Vader says, okay, we're in accord, we'll do that. And so they leave Aphra and go to get the Plasma Devils. So as Aphra gets to escape, it goes back to Thanoth and Vader, and basically they form a plan. They're going to do a bombing run, and then Vader's going to go down by himself to go the only exit that hasn't been bombed, and he goes down there, manages to basically kill all of them, and there's a Y-wing that starts to escape and fly away, and Vader throws his lightsaber, which slices part of the Y-wing's engines, and it ends them, essentially. Vader manages to pull his lightsaber back with the Force, says there is no escape in a badass way as usual, and then it changes scene to on Tague's ship. Tague is speaking to Carbin, the twins, Thanoth, Vader, and Chulon Voidgazer, the apprentices essentially, and Vader says that he killed the Plasma Devils and got that all sorted and things. And when Tague says, well, you were meant to find that thief who stole our credits. And Thanoth basically says, look, I'm to blame and things. And Vader says, no, the decision was mine. Chasing after a few missing coins or crushing the rebels, that isn't a choice. And then Tague says, well, you made the correct decision in this case. So in that regard, they managed to all get off scot-free. Obviously, Aphra managed to escape. After Vader's kind of done with that, he speaks to Thanoth, and Thanoth says, look, I'm really thankful for being able to work with you. I really appreciate that. Thank you for backing me up there as well with what we did. Really, it's been an honour serving you, Vader. And Vader says, yeah, it's been great as well with you. Not quite in that sort of tone, you know what Vader's like. But he manages to get on the good side of Thanoth, even though he was subtly betraying them the whole time, which is very, very clever. So it goes to where Aphra is sat, I think, on Anthem 13 again, waiting. Vader shows up and says, well, and Aphra immediately tells Vader the boy is on Vrogus Vas. And Vader says, well, I'm surprised to see you here. And Aphra says, I sent you a message and I thought, if I can prove to you that I'm here and I'm giving you the information and that I'm willing to still cooperate with you, it's a much more chance I'm going to survive. Whereas if I hid this information and tried to run, you would eventually just get me. And Vader says, that's fine. You are still useful to me at this time, so I will let you live, but do not make me regret this. Aphra says, look, do you need any assistance? Do you need me to come with you to Vrogus Vas or anything? And Vader says, no, this task is for me alone. And as Vader flies away and Aphra's kind of standing there watching his ship fly away, something has kind of caught what they're doing, which I believe is the red dot I mentioned a little bit earlier. There's a red dot in a cave that kind of spied on them. And so the final panel of the comic is Carbin, who's the Mon Calamari with the Grievous body, saying, so I'm going to quote him, Carbin can help you in your shameless attempts to usurp my mission. Oh dear rival, you will find the troublesome boy in Vrogus Vas, but he won't be alone. And then it says, to be continued in Vader Down. Now, I have read Vader Down. I read it ages ago, and it's a really, really good comic. It's as good as a one-off special, so if you're unsure about dipping your toes in the Darth Vader realm, Vader Down's a really cool comic. It's got some of the coolest Vader scenes in that I've seen. It is just Vader going mental and massacring loads of people. It's pretty cool. And yeah, that's where the story continues. Vader Down is what I'm going to be addressing in 2 weeks' time. Next week, I'm going to do the Lando comic, which is part of the Heroes of A New Hope, which, if you remember a little while ago, I did the Princess Leia mini-series, which was set around the time of the main run of Star Wars comics and things, and the Vader comics, to be honest. Princess Leia comic, Lando comic, and Chewbacca comic are all part of this Heroes of A New Hope collection that I've got, which is very tasty and looks very nice. If you go on the Genuine Chit-Chat Instagram, with all of these shows, I take photos of the covers, and a lot of the time it's an annual/volume, so it's just the cover, but sometimes I've got the individual issues and they look very tasty. The Mace Windu ones look really, really cool as well, and I've got a variant cover. Anyway, that's me nerding out about comics and things. So yeah, as I said, next week is going to be the Lando comic, which is written by Charles Soule, who played like a Star Wars comics and canon bingo here with some of the episodes, the amount of times I mentioned Charles Soule. But yeah, Lando comic that I have not yet read, so I'm very excited to read that. Then is going to be the Vader Down comic, which is the crossover between the main run of Star Wars comics and the next part of these Vader comics here. The week after that, not really sure what I'll do next. I have recently bought the Galaxy's Edge comic annual volume thing collection of the miniseries, and Galaxy's Edge is around the sequel era, and it's obviously a tie-in with at Disneyland and Disney World. They've got Galaxy's Edge and the immersive Star Wars stuff, which I am clamouring to go to, which hopefully I'll be going to America in like 2022 or something to be able to go see that. But Galaxy's Edge is about that. I don't really know much else about it, apart from I think people are trying to find some sort of ancient artifact. So the light plan at the moment, for final time because I keep saying it, Lando next week, Vader Down, Star Wars, Vader crossover the week after that. The week after that, probably going to be Galaxy's Edge, but I haven't fully decided on that. And then the week after that will then be probably the Star Wars Volume 3. And then, it'll be alternate weeks will be the Star Wars and then the Vader run, and we'll kind of go from there as it seems. If there's any Star Wars comics that I haven't really mentioned that don't seem to be on the horizon, please contact me and let me know, and I'll either do an episode on them quite soon, or I'll respond to you and give you some information about them and things. There are the Age of Republic, Age of Rebellion, and Age of Resistance comics. There's just collections of one-shot comics about specific characters. I will be delving into them at a future date as well. I have also purchased the first annual/volume of the Poe Dameron comics as well. There's 9, I think, there's either 7 or 9 volumes of the Poe Dameron comics. So obviously that, as well as the main run of Star Wars comics and the Vader comics, and then I need to just tackle the Canon comic as well at some point, which there's quite a few of. I'm going to work out whereabouts I'm going to do this, because what I don't want to do is just have, this week is all about Star Wars, main run, next week is all about Vader, next week is Poe Dameron. If I do every one as just an ongoing series, it's not as varied in things, and I think people who aren't as interested in the ongoing series might lose a bit of interest. So I'm going to keep it trying to be every other week one of the main run series, and every other week being either one-shots or mini-series. So that's what you can generally expect from Star Wars Comics and Canon in the coming month. As I said, check out all the other shows on the Comics in Motion podcast network feed thing, because we've now got a full roster. Check out my other show, Genuine Chit-Chat. I've had plenty of the guys from the Comics in Motion lot on the show. Any that I haven't had on, I'm planning on having on in the future. I've had loads of other cool guests, be it podcasters or just other interesting people on there. If you're interested in informal, uncensored, genuine conversation with people that just have something interesting to say, check out Genuine Chit-Chat. If you're not really fussed on that sort of thing and you just want to hear loads of Star Wars stuff, subscribe to the feed of Comics in Motion and you'll get lots more Star Wars things, as well as loads of other cool things as well. Follow me on social media. I've got Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, all at Genuine Chit-Chat, or you can email me at starwarscomicsandcanon@outlook.com, or you can email me at genuinechitchat@outlook.com. They both go to the same inbox because I'm lazy and it makes my life a lot easier. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. As I said, contact me if you want anything or have any pointers or just want to say hello. And if not, then you guys will hear from me next week. So I hope you guys are all well, and may the Force be with you.